Hello and welcome to the Ask the Expert series. I'm Susan Rosney, Sustainability Officer with Chartered Accountants Ireland. And every month I invite an expert to answer your questions on sustainability. I'm joined today by Gordon Naughton. Gordon is a Chartered Accountant and founder and Chief Executive of Tactive. Tactive works with businesses to access funding and supports and grants to achieve growth. Gordon knows a huge amount about the type of supports and grants that are available, particularly for the green agenda. So for sustainability related programs and events. And I'm delighted you could join us today, Gordon. Thank you very much indeed for being with us.
No problem at all, and thanks for having me.
And the first question I have for you, Gordon, is I know we all know why the green agenda is important, but it always bears repeating about why this is so valuable now and so valid now.
Yeah. I think the main thing with the green agenda is that there's a couple of points, and like one of those is from a consumer perspective. So consumers are demanding more sustainable products and more sustainable practices, and I think marketeers and companies are copying on too that like consumers' purchases are becoming a reflection, an outward reflection of their own value system as well. So they need to be catered for in that. You'll see that in terms of advertising in your adverts and all that kind of stuff and coming through. But also it's important in terms of attracting staff, particularly the younger generation who have a very strong sustainability agenda. So I don't think it's a superfluous add-on in terms of have you got any questions. I think they genuinely are interested in sustainable companies and companies that have a strong value system. It's also an incredibly well-funded area, you know, so like you have trillions of dollars in ESG funds who are only dying to invest in sustainable companies. And then you've also got supports like the Green Deal, which we'll talk about later, which is €1 trillion to be deployed over the next 10 years. And of course, if all that isn't good enough for you, it's also the right thing to do, you know. So it's best if people actually do the right thing for the right reason. But of course, if it's a virtuous result of an unvirtuous goal, well, at least it's the right thing to do. But like, I think the world is copping on to, and people in the world are copping on that the earth is a living thing, and like anybody who has a garden or kids or pets knows that you have to look after living things that they don't last. Like, you know, like we're seeing now the impact of more people on the planet, increased consumerism, increased raw materials, and it's having a big impact on climate. You know, like when my grandfather was born about 1900, there was only 1 billion people on the planet. Like now there's 8 billion, pushing on 9 billion, and that's having a huge impact. And you'll see there that like half of all CO2 emissions have occurred since 1990 and a third since 2005. Like, so it's absolutely phenomenal. That's driven by more people, increased consumerism, and much longer supply chains. Like when my grandfather was born, like everything would have been local, would have been supplied local, used local, and made to last. But now everything is crisscrossing the world loads of times before. And
conspicuous consumption, very much. We're weapons of mass consumption.
Absolutely, and like that's all leading to huge impact on climate change as well. Like, you know, we know that increased climate change leads to increased vapor, leads to heavier rains, leads to more flooding, leads to the heating up of the earth releasing more greenhouse gases, and then comes a runaway train in terms of increased temperatures and the effect of that. So it is hugely important.
And something you mentioned just rang a bell with me, the idea that we no longer or can no longer separate business from any of this. So we are part of the problem potentially in our so definitely in our consumption, but also businesses have a role, and businesses are very much an intrinsic part of this. So we can no longer divorce the concept of business from the fact that it's in this continuum. It has an impact on biodiversity. It's impacted by any changes in biodiversity and climate. But another thing that you mentioned as well was the trillions. So something that I know a lot of businesses do struggle with is access to finance. And you also mentioned the Green Deal. So the Green Deal is a European, that's legislation. You'd have to correct me there, because I know the Green Deal is an enormous package of measures, but it's almost too enormous for me to get my head around. What is the EU Green Deal?
Well, the EU Green Deal is a commitment across the European countries that we're going to get. It's reducing carbon emissions. So they're looking to reduce carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 and then become climate neutral by 2050. And we're looking to become the first carbon neutral bloc across the world. And to do that, they know that you need to invest money in that. So they're releasing like €1 trillion over the next 10 years across a broad number of initiatives and themes to improve that. So that includes like energy, transport, pollution, finance, the Just Transition Fund, and the circular economy. And like the Just Transition Fund is it's to try and transition those people. In Irish context, it's like the Bord na Móna, you know, those areas infected by Bord na Móna, the transition fund, but they don't want to leave them behind. They don't want to recreate a situation like Detroit and the Rust Belt in the States where you just abandon those areas and those people have no jobs. So what they're trying to do is put those people back into sustainable economy. You'll see that in Portugal, where they're closing down a massive coal plant and they're actually putting in a sustainable energy plant instead, and they're using those people to employ them in that, you know. So it's part of a broad initiative now. Like obviously you have EU law, but then it has to be indoctrined into Irish law and stuff like that. So it's more of a broader commitment, and each of the countries is has to do their own part to that, which it leads us on to the climate action plan, really.
And that's it, getting down to the national and local level. The EU Green Deal then is filtering down, shall we say, down to local level through initiatives like the climate action plan. And when you're talking about the kind of finance and supports that businesses can avail of, what are we talking about there? Are there grants that they apply to, or is it more supportive grants like the grants and supports available from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, where they're able to access grants in that way? So how does that process work?
There's an absolute plethora of grants and supports out there, and it's more linked to activity rather than blurting out every grant and support that's out there, you know. So the grant supports activity is really the other way around, where you look at the grant then dictate the activity after. So like you have like fantastic supports, like you have like green loans is one example, where you have reduced cost of funding, and you also have what's coming down the track from the SCBI is a sustainable loan. So that will be released in like Q4 this year, and that will be reduced cost of funding and reduced requirements, something similar to the credit guarantee scheme for that. And you have accelerated capital allowances as well, where people are able to essentially depreciate the asset over 1 year and use it against your tax bill, right? For like very large grants, they're done out of Europe, like the 2 million plus ones. So you can also, what they do for the very large grants is they manage them centrally, and for the smaller ones, they hive them down into local like national and local organizations to disperse them out. Like you have Exceed as well, which is about energy efficient equipment. You have the renewable heat schemes, like 30% of your cost of renewable heat schemes. You have electric vehicle vans. You have the climate action vouchers, which is about getting in a specialist to help you with your climate action plan. And then within Enterprise Ireland, that could go forward to a Green Plus grant, which would be like 50%. And at the local enterprise office level, you got the Green for Micro, which is a specialist comes in, reviews your business. And then you have also the EPA have like, you can apply for 100 grand, 50% loan or 50% grant, non-repayable, to help you towards creating sustainable products and sustainable businesses, which is quite similar to the circular economy one, which is a maximum of 250, and that's 80%. And then you got the Just Transition Fund, which I mentioned previously, which is the sort of areas that are impacted by the Bord na Móna exits. So they're like your Offaly's, your Roscommons, Trees, Galways, that kind of general Longford region. And that can be up to 80%, and includes your capital acquisitions and also includes your running costs. So that can be 80%. So there's absolutely a huge level of supports out there. And I suppose it's about talking to people like myself, or your local enterprise office, or Enterprise Ireland, or even the people within the institute as well, to try and signpost people towards what's out there, you know.
That seems to definitely be an issue when you said that there's loads out there. Because I remember even the first time you and I spoke, I was asked, I was saying, you know, we've got information on the Chartered Accountant's website, and I have a sustainability resources hub, and there's a section there on financing sustainability. But you're saying that's great and all, but if you were to go through all of the grants and supports that are available, there'd be like several dozen filing cabinets. You actually do need these signposts. And something else that sounds to me would be an issue, that most people in the day-to-day work of running a business would not have the time to devote to this. Although by the same token, you're talking about 100 grand. So that is a lot of money, and would suggest that they should maybe be making the time available either to look for what grants are available for themselves, or else maybe get some advice, talk to the local enterprise office, the local authorities, or whoever else is available there to provide that information, because, you know, as you said, there's a lot there.
There is, yeah. Like if I worked at companies like on small grants in terms of like just helping them with getting in specialists look at it, but I've also got companies like 5 million worth of grants as well, you know. So like some of these grants aren't insignificant funds, but that's where I suppose Tactive comes in, and that really to come in, help people identify what they're going for, help them with the application process, help with the project management, and like locally we have a very strong success rate. We're like over 95% in terms of our applications right now. So in terms of coming in, helping people and getting the application, helping the process, and if they want us to stay on and help them project manage the project, that's cool. And if they want us to just do that themselves, that's okay too.
And that would, that would kind of remove the risk that people may perceive that, okay, I'll put loads of time and energy, of my valuable time and energy, into looking for these grants, and then by the end of it, I mightn't get it. Whereas you're saying, actually, the success rate is really high. And there's a connect now between government policies and their packages wanting to give this money, wanting to reach this agenda, and companies needing it. And then, so the success rate, as you say, it's quite strong.
It is, yeah. And I find too, like the people in those organizations that are awarding those grants, like they're attracted to those organizations because they're helpful people and they want to help, you know. So you'll find that they're very open with their assistance and help. So like what I generally do is, like, hear someone that wants help someone, let's pick up the phone and talk to them about what we're looking at doing and seeing if it's a fit. And then if it is a fit, I'll take it on. And if it's a non-runner, it just stops there, you know. So you can get, the last thing I would do would be create a massive application in silence and wait for it to die moment. You know, you have a conversation and then you progress the conversation, and like they'll tell you if you're getting warmer or colder in terms of the direction you're going. But I'd never shift the direction of the project more than a couple of degrees, because like the last thing you want to do is start changing a project just to get a grant, and then you're doing all the wrong things, you know. So it has to be towards your proper objective. Like I remember working with a tax partner before in Deloitte, and he used to say, you never let the taxman drive the bus. You know, he said, like, you drive the bus, the taxman supports you with that. Same with me, like I never drive the bus, I support, you know. So you never change it that way, you know.
And is there a difference between the type of grants that, like, are there questions that people should ask themselves before choosing the grant that they go for? I mean, you mentioned there that you don't want to change it kind of midstream.
The main I suppose the main thing with grants is they follow activity. You know, like sometimes you'd have people that might ask me, like, is there any grants from my business? You go, well, what are you looking at doing? Like, I don't know. But so what kind of grants are there? You go, no, you kind of need to have an idea what you want to do, and then the grants support you on that journey. You know, you wouldn't really just go off and do something just for the sake of a grant, because even the best funded grants, you still have to match with something, right? So
yeah, there's no point looking for kind of a grant for heavy machinery if you're a professional advisor or something, or financial advisor. It's unlikely that you're going to need that. And actually, on the subject of heavy machinery, I've just seen a question in about this, which is, Does Gordon see the flow of grants going more towards new, innovative, sustainable initiatives? Or are most of them going towards supporting existing practices, such as the purchase of electric vehicles, replacing heavy machinery, heavy emission plant, etc.? Is that something that you have seen, a change in direction?
By virtue of kind of EU supports and EU competition laws and stuff like that, there's more grants for R&D than there is for others, you know. So it can be quite it can be quite difficult to get grants just to increase capacity. You can get employment grants and stuff like that leading to additional employment, but it is harder. But it's actually one of my bugbears of Ireland in terms of our capacity for recycling is brutal. You know, in terms of what goes to recycling is very different to what's actually recycled, and what gets exported to be recycled or landfilled or incinerated is a bit of a shame, you know. So I think at this moment, like as a bloc, we're kind of hoping for these sort of magical, innovative solutions that will take carbon out of the air and stuff like that. But then you have the crazy situation where you don't have enough capacity to recycle the amount of plastic bottles we have in the country and stuff like that, you know. So I'd like to see, I suppose, more capacity built on existing technology rather than the hope of a sort of magical technology to solving all the problems, you know, because one of the things about that is it kind of puts too much of an emphasis on some sort of future big win rather than actually taking action now in terms of what we know. So there is grants towards R&D than there is towards capacity, but that's not to say that there's not plenty of grants towards capacity either. You know, it's just when it comes to the bigger grants that tend to be more towards R&D.
It's a good point. And I've noticed that there are some grants that they seem quite small, but actually will have a big impact, I think, because like I was looking at the energy audit grant. So in Chartered Accountants Ireland, we conducted an internal energy audit in June 2020 and 2021. Sorry, I'm losing track of time. And we, you know, somebody came in, went through the whole building, identifies areas where we can make some material change, reduce our carbon emissions, and our facilities team is working through those recommendations now. So while now, unfortunately, we just missed the grant. The grant that there is now a grant available from Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, which allows, I think it's 2,000 towards the cost of having a registered internal energy auditor, registered with the SEAI, come in and do an audit. And but I was thinking that would be a very valuable one for companies to do. So, and it's something that they can take immediate action on as well, and reduce emissions in areas where they hadn't really expected.
It is, yeah. Like sometimes, like the big impacts don't need a big spend. You know, sometimes it's just knowledge based, or just having in an expert in to identify where it is. Like I'm a big fan of lean as a principle, like, and particularly the Pareto principle within that. Like it's also known as the 80-20 rule. Like where you, like if you do your analysis, you'll probably find that 80% of your waste comes from 20% of your emissions, or 80% CO2 comes from 80% of your activity, and that Pareto principle actually follows through in terms of the recyclability of your products. We're just saying 80% of the recyclability of your product is determined at design phase. So if you're able to bring in an expert on our resource in terms of recycling sustainability at the design phase of a new product, it makes things an awful lot easier come the back end as well. So like, so my point there is like knowledge is a huge, can be a huge saver in terms of just identifying those areas that make a big impact, and they don't always need to use. Sometimes they do, but not always.
So the likes of actually the LEO, the local enterprise office advisors, you know, when they go into a business and give that advice, okay, that's not a monetary grant, but it is a support and it could lead to something significant then.
It is, yeah. Like at the local enterprise office, you got the Green for Micro, which would be 2 days with a green expert, you know. So you're trying to identify where the waste is and baseline it, you know. They kind of go, right, what's their, like where's their waste, where's their consumption, where's their emissions coming from, and then you baseline it and you go, right, where's the areas to tackle? They go, bang, there's where I'm going to get the most bang for my buck, and you tackle those areas. So it can be a very good starting point for people. And even before that, like you have the climate toolkit for business as well, which is a very good kind of starting point for people to build their knowledge, like, you know. But
that's on that's on the Dublin, the Enterprise Authorities, the DEET website, the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. They have a free service available to all businesses, which is called the Climate for Business Toolkit.
Yeah, exactly. And like everybody's starting from a different knowledge base too, like, you know, so it all depends on where you're starting your journey, you know. But
yeah,
I'd be a huge fan of getting in experts and getting in, boosting your knowledge and building on it, you know.
Yeah, and definitely to start. That's another great thing as well. We don't say just start. You know, of course, it's going to be disheartening if you're going to try to decarbonize your whole premises immediately. That's not going to work. But you can take start, and then there's support, there's help, there's advice, there's grants.
Oh, absolutely. And like I say, like, you know, in terms of getting a quick win or to get started, like, you know, it's important to keep the momentum going, because if you try and tackle your most difficult and biggest problem first, you might fail, and it might just ruin the momentum or ruin the thought process and support within the organization to do it. So initially you're trying to do the quick wins to build the positive goodwill and the messaging around your company, and then you're progressing to your hardest problem by picking intermediate problems within that. So you kind of go, well, at that stage I'll know more about this to be able to tackle the bigger problem then. So you're building your knowledge as you go along is generally the best route for tackling the bigger problems.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like a sediment, you know, you're just building it up all the time. And if people want to find out more information, what's the best next step they can take then?
Yeah, it's depending. It's depending on each of their particular industry as well. Like, you know, so you have the resources on the institute, which is the governance resource centre, which is a great resource. Then you have the climate toolkit for business, and then you also, like, if people are in our NAIDS, they can form part of the chapter 0, which is a good forum for building knowledge and how to build that conversation at board level. And also, like, I might send on a link to the EU sustainability, or you got the EU sustainability reporting as well, but you also got the EU Commission published an article about circular economy, which is a fantastic resource as well. But in terms of talking to people, I think talk to your enterprise office, or if you're an Enterprise Ireland, or the SEI or EPA, and like that, you'll find, as I was saying earlier, like a lot of these people are very helpful people.
Yeah,
it might be the exact organization that will help you, but they can signpost you to people who can. And of course, I'm here as well.
yes, so it's Tactive. They can find you online as well. I'm just going to put that into the chat as well, which is tactive.ie. And there's one question that I just had from one of my colleagues, actually, is could you share some examples of where you have maybe helped particular companies? Now, you don't necessarily obviously have to name the company, but you could, if you wanted to to describe some projects where you were able to secure funding for a particular business.
Yeah, there's loads of them. Like, you know, like last year, I think we raised about 8 million for companies across grants, across maybe 40, 50 customers, you know. So there's loads of fine examples there. One of the customers there, we were helping with the Circle Era application. We actually ended up getting 40% of the overall pot of that. So that was in relation to creating a circular economy product. So what we're using is product that would have went to landfill and incineration, and recovering that product, cleaning it, machining it, and upcycling it into a valuable out product, and then getting that market ready to sell into the industry. So we'd have got them 80% of funding for that, and that would have covered a lot of it would have been time, inputs towards prototyping, and also professional fees, certification, all that kind of stuff. So we're able to use that money, and it's been a hugely successful product to date. So without that kind of funding, I don't think we'd be as far on, or certainly within the time frame it was. But like for us, that was probably 5 or 6 days work to do that, you know, to get on that and to win that. You know, so in terms of effort and reward, it's good, as well as that the application process helps shape the project as well, you know. So I don't think without going through that process and that guidance, it would have been as efficient of actually rolling out that. So it asks those difficult questions at the start, and also forces us into again, sort of lean thinking in terms of putting the customer first as part of the design process. So in terms of meeting needs and then correcting back. So yeah, there's loads of good examples. Now, none avail to mention the company name. So.
But certainly, just to loop back to the very beginning, you could see the benefit of all of this. It's the benefit of, obviously, to the planet, and we know about that, and to recruiting employees, attracting and retaining talent, and indeed clients. But also just the act of applying for a grant can make you think about the product, maybe build in recyclability in the design stage, or however whatever way you're focused. But there's huge benefits just to operating in that manner. And I know myself, when we were at the Institute, we applied for it was actually an award, sustainability awards. Just the act of doing that, pulling everything together, is such a fantastic experience, and it really shines a light on various aspects of the business. So it seems to be win-win, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, like even the process of forcing you to stop and think is a valuable exercise in itself.
Well, that leads me neatly to I think to stopping and thinking. But I think we've taken a lot of your time, and it's been very valuable. Gordon Naughton, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again. I've put a link to Tactive on our chat for all of our attendees to see, along with the link to the Sustainability Hub as well. For anybody who's interested, please have a look at the hub and all the resources that are there. They're all free. They're free to download. They're free to circulate. And again, Gordon, thank you very much indeed. And with that, everyone, goodbye.
Okay, see you guys. Thanks a million.